Welcome back, everyone. I am very happy to have on Hero Blend number 38, Mr. Sean O'Connell from Cinema Blend. How's it going, man?
It's going so well, dude. We have so much to talk about.
This is the week that I thought Comic-Con was going to be. I expected this much insanity about the future of comic book movies until 2020. There are now 30 comic book movies coming out, or I should say 30 Marvel and DC comic book movies coming out between now and 2020. Out of this world insane. I'm beyond stoked.
And yet the bulk of the DC stuff dropped during a shareholders meeting, and I don't know how many people were really prepared for it to come on a Wednesday. I was blindsided by this.
I was completely shocked. I think you actually sent me a text message, and I was like, oh, the DC universe has all come together now all of a sudden. So yes, this has been a crazy, crazy week. But I do want to talk actually about Marvel versus DC at the movies. I should first start by saying I think brand loyalty is kind of stupid in this sense. Like, you can love Marvel and DC. There's plenty of greatness to go around there. But at the same time, there is an interesting kind of thing that's developed in the relationship between both companies on the big screen, and a lot of that has come out this week. Let's start with your just initial thoughts about this. I mean, where do you see Marvel as compared to DC right now in the cinematic universe as a whole?
In better shape because they have a head start, for sure. And it's because they've proven that certain characters are going to work on screen. They have their proven sort of, it's not even a big three anymore, but it's Iron Man, Captain America, Thor, Hulk.
Yeah.
The ones that they've assembled into the Avengers. They've even gone so far as to prove that people will show up for their oddball choices like Guardians of the Galaxy. So they are making a lot of these experiments, and they're testing it in the market, and it's working really well for them. So I think they're further along in developing what their voice is, whereas DC is sort of taking that model of, hey, 2 movies a year structured around characters that we think people like, but they haven't tested anything yet. They haven't really proven, because even Man of Steel, it did well, but it wasn't this blockbuster like, oh my God, we need 11 versions of what you did.
It wasn't an Iron Man-like phenomenon. It wasn't. I mean, it was successful, and I personally liked it, but it didn't get everyone totally riled up.
Sure, and I don't even think Favreau's first Iron Man suggested where we would be with Marvel right now. It was a good first step. But it wasn't until they did Thor and then they did Captain America that people were like, oh, they're laying enough of a foundation here, and they're growing. Now, that doesn't mean it isn't really exciting what DC is planning, but until we see more of it, I'm hesitant to say that they're on the right track yet.
Well, I think you make the exact right point, which is that DC right now, they are kind of doing their version of Marvel Phase 1. They kind of are in a position where they have to, I mean, because they haven't spent the last couple decades bringing up characters that, like Wonder Woman or Aquaman or Shazam, any of these characters that had potential underneath the Warner Brothers banner. They just kept focusing on Batman and Superman. So they do have to have this kind of introductory process, which, there's potential of these characters. I mean, like Flash is getting his own television series now, and it's been incredibly popular. So, I mean, the idea of Flash getting his own movie soon makes total sense. And it's interesting. I mean, well, that's a whole other conversation, worrying about crossover between television. But DC is in a position where they do have to kind of teach people about these characters. It is interesting that they are jumping into the Justice League as quickly as they are. I mean, we only have if you can't even consider Batman v Superman a solo movie, so I guess you really only have Man of Steel and Wonder Woman before we jump into it, which is interesting.
That is a huge question that I had about that in terms of the timing of it all, because Justice League is coming early, so I would assume that we're either going to meet a lot of these heroes in Batman versus Superman, and then when we get to their standalone films, they don't have to be, they won't be origin stories, I'm guessing.
Yeah. That's honestly what I'm really hoping for, too. And I think you're completely right. I think that we are probably going to get a lot of cameos at the end of Batman v Superman, which honestly will give kind of what Man of Steel was lacking. Like, everyone wanted that at the end of Man of Steel. It didn't happen. But I mean, what was I saying? But with Justice League, I think you're absolutely right. You can move the characters beyond their origin stories, which I love, because we are beyond that at this point. Like, you don't have to have everyone, especially, I mean, Flash is a great example, because we are seeing the origins of Flash play out on television right now. It's going to be old news by the time 2018 rolls around and we're seeing a Flash movie. So you'll be able to get a sense of the character within just their normal lives. It's like an animated series where, like, animated series didn't start from the beginning. They dropped you into the superhero's life, and you watch them on an adventure, and that's great. That's exactly what you want.
I also think it's really hard for them to plan as far out as 2020, because, I mean, and maybe that's why they put Cyborg as a character that people might know but aren't intimately familiar with, and even Green Lantern, which is going to be a reboot.
Right.
It's so far from now, and so much can change between now and then, that to say you're doing that is great. That's kind of just earmarking, like, we have a long-term plan.
Mm-hmm.
But unless they really know, like, who their directors are going to be, who their screenwriters might be, are they going to have a story that's a through line through this? Like, Marvel's really good about picking through lines.
Mm-hmm.
They introduce Thanos, and you know that that's going to sort of be, an undercurrent. They mention Civil War, and then you start to think about the different ways it's going to all tie together. We don't have that in the DC universe yet, but I think Batman Superman's going to do a lot to lay that out.
They don't have a universe right now is really what it is. They don't really, I mean, in order to build those kind of stories, you need to have an established universe. But at the same time, I imagine that Warner Brothers has been developing scripts for years and years. I mean, they've certainly had the association with DC. They understand the growing popularity of these characters. So I'm sure that they have a few scripts in the hopper that they want to, like, eventually toss out to directors and writers, see what they can do with it. But I'm actually on the same level with you in that I'm not 100% sure how stable Warner Brothers knows exactly what they're doing. Because, this announcement is coming so soon after the whole Civil War thing, which is interesting unless Marvel kind of planned that pre-attack. But, I mean, DC needs to show its strength. It needs to show that it does have a plan, because Marvel clearly does. And like I said, I don't love the competition between the two, because as a fan, as an audience member, I'm in it just for great comic book movies. But if we're actually talking about the state of the industry, that is something, and DC is clearly flexing their muscles. Because, I mean, and if we want to switch over to the Marvel side of the conversation, we still aren't 100% sure what Marvel Phase 3 is going to look like. We still have a couple untitled projects that are coming out in the next couple of years.
Yeah, and it was funny, like, we tracked both of these universes, and when the DC stuff dropped today, I was surprised by how much of it we actually knew. Like, we knew enough about those characters that were going to be announced. We learned things like Ezra Miller, but even with Jason Momoa, we kind of knew that. Same thing with Marvel. Like, we think that there's going to be a Thor 3, and people even toss around what potential subplots for it could be. But nothing's been confirmed. We don't know who Doctor Strange is going to be, or how that's going to factor into the larger Phase 3. We're speculating about when Thanos might show up, but the announcement of Civil War seems to push him back even further. So
that's the case, yeah.
Yeah, so it sounds like they have a really big plan, but a lot of that stuff we're still guessing.
Well, honestly, I think the announcement of Civil War, I think, is a huge deal, if not only because Civil War isn't a movie you can do. It's not one movie. Like, that was a major crossover event that took over the entire universe, because it dealt with every hero choosing a separate side and going face to face. And that's going to take multiple movies. It sounds like it's going to start in Captain America 3, but I would not be shocked at all if that shockwaves from that continue through until Avengers 3 might even be the climax of that. I think we've even mentioned this on the site. An interesting possibility is that the rise of Thanos is the ultimate thing that brings everyone together. It's the reason why they're like, oh crap, we have to stop fighting each other because this guy is going to destroy everything. That's completely legitimate. Like, the way that the Civil War comic ends is Captain America just has the sudden realization. He's actually attacked by civilians who say, "Stop this! Stop this!" But honestly, if Avengers 3 were to end with, like, the invasion of Thanos and every superhero who's previously punching each other in the face all of a sudden looks up and sees this giant, that could be pretty cool, and it would work fairly well narratively.
Well, here are some of the things that I need to know in terms of feeling comfortable about the direction of both of their universes. I think we need to start hearing some more directors. Right now on the DC side, we only know Zack Snyder, and David Ayer, I had him on the phone earlier this week for Suicide Squad, and he just stonewalled me. He wouldn't answer a single thing about it. Basically wanted him to pretend that he wasn't even really attached to it or knew that it was happening. He's very much just like, I'm not in that room, I'm not that guy. And I was like, oh, all right, what an odd conversation. Marvel has a number of people in their stable. We hear rumors that the Russos might want to continue where Whedon left off. You know, someone asked me today, like, who is DC's Kevin Feige? Is it Zack Snyder? And I was like, I think Snyder's more like their Whedon. And I'm not trying to make that comparison, believe me.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
he's more like the director whose voice has been compelling that story. I want to hear who they're hiring for all these other projects. Who's the right director for an Aquaman movie? Who's the right person for Wonder Woman? And even if they do the Civil War, like, you need a strong voice. Is Whedon going to come back?
Well, honestly, I mean, to talk about the DC side, it is interesting that Zack Snyder he did Man of Steel, he's doing Batman versus Superman, he's doing Justice League, he's rumored to also do the second part of Justice League. Zack Snyder is an extremely stylistic director. Nobody makes movies quite like him, and the fact that you are establishing that visual, that aesthetic for the entire DC universe up to this point is really interesting, because I'm curious if it will end up affecting the other characters. If, like, a Wonder Woman movie is going to have shades of a Zack Snyder film, simply because he's been the guy who is determining the aesthetic of this larger universe. Personally, I really hope it doesn't. I really hope that Warner Brothers reaches out to filmmakers who they think can find the tone and the in a visual structure based on the characters individually that they're going to. Like, honestly, a Flash movie should not look like Man of Steel. It just shouldn't, especially if you have 22-year-old Ezra Miller. Well, he's not going to be 22 when Flash comes out, but that movie should not look like Man of Steel. That should be completely its own thing, as should Suicide Squad. I mean, David Ayer has his own visual style. I'm very curious to see what he'll do with that. But that is something I'm very, I hope for Warner Brothers is looking at, that they are looking at not just creating the same look throughout their entire universe.
Well, and what we learned with Marvel, too, is that when you plan too far in advance and you string directors along like Edgar Wright, you lose them. And there's problems that crop up, and then you got to find replacements. So it's one of those challenges of planning so far in advance.
But, I mean, and you mentioned this earlier, is the rumors about the Russos potentially taking over for not only Avengers 2, but Avengers 3. I love that. I mean, I loved Captain America, the Winter Soldier to a stupid degree. I'm a huge Arrested Development and Community fan, so, I mean, the Russos, they speak my language. So, and they're incredibly talented guys. I've talked to them, you've talked to them. I mean, you know these guys. You know that they think well. They have Marvel's best interests at heart. I love the fact that they're going to be the ones that are handling the Tony Stark versus Captain America, like that, and well, Steve Rogers and Captain America versus Iron Man, like that. They are perfect for that, especially after seeing Winter Soldier.
Yeah, I totally agree. I just think with both of those universes, we're past the point where a filmmaker, I think, can come to them and say, I have a deep passion for this character. Can I have that movie? Now they need to just find the right people. And I'm assuming that now that we know a lot of casting, we're going to start hearing directors soon. So that will start reinforcing my confidence in the decisions that we made.
Exactly. The fact that they know, especially on the DC side, now that we know what these projects are, they are going to start looking for filmmakers. I mean, it's weird that we already have, it's Ray Fisher as Cyborg, who's not going to be until 2020. We already have that star. We have Dwayne Johnson starring in a Shazam movie as Black Adam, no director on that. But I think those gaps are going to start being filled in before long. Like, you can't look that far in the future and not have some kind of solid ground underneath it to kind of support everything. Sean, give me your closing thoughts on this, man.
I was just dumbfounded by the sheer size of the DC universe. I'm still wanting to see, like, you can put a name up, you can put a title up, and you can announce a date. I want to see footage. I got to see some Batman, Superman footage to get an idea of where, like, even the images that were revealed at Comic-Con where you got to see Wonder Woman's look and how Batman and Superman were going to be facing off at each other. I just need to see it in action. It's a visual medium, and I want to see how it's coming off of the page and coming together in this world.
Honestly, though, it's rough that DC. I mean, we're getting 2 more Marvel movies next year in Avengers and Age of Ultron. DC isn't getting its stuff together until 2016. We have a year to wait until all this stuff starts coming out, which is painful. Come on, like, I mean, I understand planning far out, but give us something now. We need instant gratification. This is America, damn it. Sean, thank you so much once again for being on the show. It's great talking with you, man.
It was like Christmas this week. I love it.
Comic-Con in October. I love it. Everyone, thank you so much for tuning in, and we will see you next week. Have a good one.